Hello everyone and welcome to week 2 of Scrum Master Primer, a free short course facilitated by IT Masters in partnership with Planet, one of the world's largest software testing consultancies. My name is Guy and I'll be your MC tonight, and your lecturer as always is Sarah Ireton. Tonight, after Sarah's lecture, we'll have a couple of representatives from Planet join us at the conclusion of the webinar. They're here to talk a little about Planet services, as well as answer any questions you may have about delivery of courses, timings, availability, countries where Planet offers Scrum courses, certification and costs. We have Mia and Jess on hand tonight in a technical support role, just in case there are any technical issues in this class tonight, which we're not anticipating. Mia and Jessica are also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is the course page. Which is where you'll find all the materials you needed for this course: readings, discussion forums, recordings of previous lectures, and so on. If you have any questions tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details provided on that page, any questions about course specifics. And of course, you're more than welcome to send in questions during the lecture using the GoToWebinar chat function. We'll have a couple of question and answer sessions spaced throughout the lecture tonight, and a longer one at the end before the representatives from Planet, who I will introduce before they come on board, start their presentation. Enough out of me though, let's get into it. Could you please welcome Sarah?
Thanks Guy, and welcome everyone to week 2 of the Scrum Master Primer course. So just as a reminder, last week we went through an overview of the Scrum framework and the Scrum Master's role and responsibilities. This week we will be covering all the elements of that framework in more detail. We're going to be discussing SCRUM Values and the concept of just enough, which is a big thing in Agile and Scrum. So all Agile methods have a set of core values. SCRUM values form the foundation on which the Scrum practices are built and align with the Agile Manifesto. That was something that we went through last week. There are 5 Scrum values: commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. Commitment is about being willing to commit and be provided with the authority to do so. Commitment's about dedication. It applies to the actions and the effort by the team throughout the sprint, not just commitment to achieving the sprint goal, not just about the final result. Focus is about only doing the work that we've committed to. It's about ensuring we focus on what is most important right now. We shouldn't worry or focus on things that might become important at some point in time in the future. It's not something we worry about until it's important then. The Scrum Master definitely can help the team focus all of their effort and skills on doing the work that they've committed to doing and not worrying about anything else, because one of the things the Scrum Master does is help remove the roadblocks and stop those interruptions to let them focus on what they need to do. So openness is about visibility of the project to everyone involved. Scrum keeps everything about a project visible. It's done so there is communication and collaboration between the team and the business to work together daily. We use things like task boards and burn down charts. Those are examples of how things are made visible to everybody involved. The teams really need to be open about their work, their progress, and their problems. They need to be open to collaboration with the stakeholders, sharing feedback, learning from each other. We've also got respect. So that's about respecting the differences in a team. It's about showing respect for people and their experiences, respecting each other's skills and expertise. It's about respecting diversity and different opinions and recognising that we can learn from each other. Courage. Basically, it's pretty much about having the courage to do everything else on the slide so far. Having the courage in admitting that requirements will never be perfect. courage in sharing all information and being transparent, courage in admitting none of us is perfect, courage to change direction when we need to do that. So Scrum core practices are a sprint, the Scrum team, and a daily build. So sprint is a fixed period of time that the team works for to produce what's referred to as potentially shippable code, and all the sprints would be the same fixed duration during a release. We've obviously got the team, which we've talked about, very fundamental. They need to be self-directed and self-organising. And Scrum recommends that teams have 7 plus or minus 2 members. So 5 to 9 is what's recommended. If we have a large project, we don't just have a bigger team, the number is important. We would have multiple Scrum teams, and these are often referred to as Scrum of Scrums. And lastly, the other core practice is a daily build. This is where we have at least one daily build and regression test for checked in code, and that would be automated as well. Let's talk a little bit more about a sprint. Sprints can be as short as 5 days or as long as 30. The team themselves decide on the length of the sprints. It would be probable that if we had a newly formed team, they would often lean towards a longer sprint length initially as they're finding their feet and learning about Scrum. So as I said, a sprint is defined as a fixed period of time that the team works for to produce potentially shippable code. And let's be clear on what potentially shippable code actually means. Acceptance and delivery of the software to the product owner is not the same thing as deployment to production or the end user. So a Scrum team will still deliver working code to the product owner at the end of every sprint, but it doesn't necessarily go out to a wider audience. And there's many factors that get taken into account when you're planning releases into production of software. You know, what are the drivers from sales or marketing? Organisations need to consider whether its staff and or its customers can absorb constant incremental deliveries. Now, if we were going to put something out the door every 2 weeks, could our users and our customers cope with that rate of change? And that's unlikely for most. And of course, the way Agile works, we're doing small chunks of work in software. So normally it might take a number of sprints to actually have a piece of functionality to completely work together. So there might be some value in getting some parts of functionality out the door, but in most instances we would have to do a number of sprints to have sufficient software available for usefulness. So moving on to the Scrum team, we've mentioned that they need to be self-directed and self-organising. What does that mean? Basically, the team has to be empowered. They need to be empowered to define a number of things. How the work for the sprint is going to be broken down into tasks. That's their decision. They decide who will perform the tasks and in which order these tasks will be done in the sprint. They obviously need to be empowered to commit to deliver and achieving their sprint goal. And they also need to be structured to support the sprint goal, and they decide how they are going to be self-organising. They decide how they are going to be self-directed. So one thing we should talk about is that the traditional team structures that we might see on an IT project, where we have a development team and then there's a separate test team and there's a separate BA team, that doesn't work for Agile projects, because communication between those skill sets is paramount. So while various roles can and do exist in a Scrum team, the key distinction is that it's a team of people brought together to achieve a goal. It's not a group of individuals working in this role-based silo of all the developers are together and all the testers are together. In Scrum, it's about people's capability and not their job title. So having the right people in the team is obviously a critical success factor. A Scrum team needs skills from various areas. Typically, they would be made up of developers, of testers, of business analysts, but ultimately any others that are required. There's no magic structure. The competencies of the individuals and the balance of the team is what's important. And we should bear in mind as well that when a new Scrum team is being set up, that no team will deliver with the highest possible performance right from the beginning. So our last core practice is a daily build. So the daily build is something that's done to ensure that all required dependencies are present and tested to show no defects have been introduced, and it also allows for rapid feedback on the new functionality and highlights any problems very quickly. So daily builds are particularly necessary when more than one developer is working on an application. It helps to ensure that the developers can work knowing that any new defects that show up are very likely a result of their own work that they've done within that last day. The tests are included to assist in determining what may have been broken by the changes included in the latest build, and of course for speed, it's automated testing. Many Agile teams will do continuous integration, which is the practice of merging all developer working copies to a shared main copy several times a day. And continuous integration is used in combination with automated unit tests. And what we have is this continual application of quality control, and it's all aimed to improve the quality of the software and to reduce the time taken to deliver it.
Would now be a good time, Sarah, for some questions?
Sorry. I was just going to say, now's the time we were going to do some questions. Do we have anything that we want to talk about?
We sure do. As is customary with this course, we've got some great questions flying in. I'll just pick a few because we won't be able to get to all of them. Does the team, a few people have asked, does the team size of 7 plus or minus 2 include the product owner and Scrum Master, or just developers and testers and the like?
It includes. Is the short answer.
Very good.
I mean, I can give a slightly long. I mean, as much as Scrum, I will just say a couple of things, because as much as Scrum recommends that, you know, the key thing here is that what you need is a team that has the capability to do what they're being asked to do in the sprint. And I know of people that I've trained that were in a team of 3, and they got stuff done and it worked for them. So okay. Although Scrum has those recommendations, the size of the team in terms of too many is the big issue. You can't really go greater than 9.
Okay, sure. And this question might be a little bit linked. Adrian has asked, how do you balance skill sets between multiple Scrum teams? And also Sherry's asked, can a Scrum team be put together from different teams, or does a Scrum team usually stick together for each project or unit of work?
So what was the first one again?
How do you balance skill sets between multiple Scrum teams, and
well,
do they stick
I mean,
together?
Again, basically, if you've got more than one Scrum team, then those skills need to be in each team. I mean, the reality is that they are working on software, and so we need people with development skills, people that can code. We need people that can do requirement solicitation. We need people that can test. It's not something that we're going into detail in on this short course. It's on the full course if people sign up for that. But you're not just a tester anymore. You're not just a BA anymore. We have what we expect people to be what's known as cross-functional, so the reality is everybody is involved in testing, not just the official people whose title might be tester. And so each team would have to have the skill set that they need to deliver what they're being asked to do. What often happens is if we've got specialist skills, so for example, performance testing is a specialist area of testing. Sometimes those sort of resources could be shared with a number of teams because they aren't needed full-time. That would be an example where resources are shared. And then the second part, could you repeat that again? Because that was an important one. I did want to answer it. Sherry, was it?
Sherry's question, yeah, that's right. Can a Scrum team be put together from different teams, or does a Scrum team usually stick together for each project or unit of work?
Well, what you want, I'm going to talk about it more next week, but the team gets what's known as their rhythm, their velocity, and so changing resources in a team it disrupts how Agile works, and planning releases and the rhythm that the team hits for them, because it's unique. So you would ideally, the team should be set and they would work together for a release. What you could do is if you were distributed, so if not everybody was in the same location, which is ideal, maybe an idea is that one person from each of those teams comes together to form their own little mini scrum team for a couple of sprints, and then maybe they go back, to their teams afterwards. It's just to help with communication and collaboration.
Okay. Cool. And maybe one last one. This one's from Fernando. What is the daily deliverable, or how is the frequency set when we are using Scrum for non-software projects, for example, process changes or project management?
So I'm not sure what the question is. I'm really sorry, Guy.
So we're talking about daily builds and integration. Would it be a similar sort of requirement for non-software projects?
Well, the daily build is specific to coding and software. So it's a project management framework, obviously, and so it can be used for other things. But obviously, if you're not using it for software, then there's not going to be a daily build. It's code related. Yeah.
But would there be a different deliverable?
I think the answer to that is it depends,
yeah.
Which is, it's a bit of a running joke actually when you teach Agile courses. Sometimes you get asked a question and all you say back is, well, it depends. And it does, it really does. If I got given a specific answer, a specific scenario, I'd probably be able to give you a clear answer. But, the reality is that most people, what we're talking about is software related.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beauty. Thank you. Well, there's still more questions, but we'll keep going, and feel free to ask some more, and we'll try and keep a few over for the question and answer at the end.
Okay, thanks. So let's move on. Scrum Artefacts is our next area. Scrum has a set of typical artifacts, and at a very high level, they are a product backlog. This is all the functionality that needs to be developed for a system. We have what's known as a release backlog and a sprint backlog. So these are what's going to be developed for the release, and the sprint backlog is what's going to be actioned in that sprint. We've then got burn down charts. So again, these can be at the release level and the sprint level. And these are where we're monitoring our progress to show the work still remaining for a release or for a sprint. And then we have the concept of a product increment, and this is the product backlog items that have been completed. So the product backlog realistically is all the business and technical functionality that needs to be developed for a system. It's the Scrum format for requirements, so to speak, and it's all the things the business want built. That's the short answer, the easy way to say it. Now, I'm actually not going to talk too much about the product backlog right now, because we're actually going to go through product backlog in more detail as part of week 3 next week. So the Scrum Burn Down chart is a visual measurement tool that shows the completed work per day against the projected rate of completion for the current project release. Its purpose is to enable the project to track how they're delivering and that they're going to hit their expected dates and expected solution within the desired schedule. So you can have a release burn down chart for the whole release, and then we could also have what's known as a sprint burn down chart. And the sprint burn down chart shows the progress within the sprint towards reaching the sprint goal. And these are both things that provide the transparency about the current performance, and it allows progress monitoring and control to meet that sprint goal on time, or if the team has to find additional measures to speed up completion of their remaining activities. So the initial sprint backlog defines the start point for all the remaining efforts. The remaining effort of all activities are collected on a daily basis and added to the graph. And in the beginning, the performance is often not as good as predicted by the ideal burn down rate. That could be due to wrong estimation or some sort of impediment that the Scrum Master needs to step in, get removed in order for them to get back to sort of full speed that they need to, burning through the work. And our last artifact is the product increment. So product increment is the selected product backlog items that have been completed during a sprint and the value of all the increments of other previous sprints. So at the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done. Now, that means it must be in an acceptable form. Now, we talked briefly about this last week, but that means that the work needs to meet both the user story acceptance criteria and also the team's definition of done, which is activities that ensure that what they're producing or creating is truly a quality product. So our next area is Scrum Ceremonies. There's a number of ceremonies, basically meetings that take place throughout the Scrum framework. We've got a sprint planning meeting. This is held at the start of a sprint. It's realistically the first thing they do, and it's planning the work for that sprint. Now, rule of thumb, according to Scrum, is that this meeting would be about an hour for every week of sprint length. So, for example, if the team has decided they're going to do 2-week sprints, then this meeting would be about 2 hours. We've then got a daily Scrum, which is something that's held daily during the sprint, and it's about the team members reporting to each other. There's this time box of 15 minutes, so this is a very short daily meeting. We've then got the sprint review, which is sometimes known as the showcase, or demo might be another word that people have heard. And this is where the team presents the product increment that has been built during the sprint to the customers. And our last one is a sprint retrospective, which is held at the end. So it's a bit like a PIR, a post-implementation review. People might have heard that term before, at the end of a sprint. It's all about helping the team to understand what went well, what didn't go so well, how we might do better next time. So as I mentioned, the sprint planning meeting is held at the start of a sprint to plan the work for that sprint, and it has 2 planning sessions known as the what meeting and the how meeting. So what are we building and how are we going to do all the work? And this meeting is to collectively plan the work that will be pulled into the sprint, and that's done between the product owner and the team, and the Scrum Master is obviously there. So the product owner uses the product backlog during the sprint planning to describe the top entries to the team, the ones that are the most important, the ones they want first. And the Scrum team then collectively estimates effort for that work. They discuss and forecast how much work they believe they can complete in the sprint time box, which is based on their team velocity. The team then devises the individual tasks that need to be performed to build the product increment, and they also decide who does what, and that body of work then becomes the sprint backlog. So the outcome of this meeting would be the sprint backlog being visible on a Scrum board or a task board. And as I say, the board is intended to provide the team and stakeholders, everyone involved, with visibility and tracking of all the tasks during the sprint through to completion. The goal of that what session is obviously to define a realistic sprint backlog containing all items that could be fully implemented until the end of the sprint. So obviously we're talking about Scrum Master. As the Scrum Master, one of your jobs in this scenario, in this meeting, is to ensure that the team does not overcommit to what they can deliver. You know, the worst thing they can do is say we can give you A, B, C and D and not deliver what they've said. So the Scrum Master has a number of responsibilities during this meeting. They're responsible for setting up the sprint planning meeting. They're responsible for removing any obstacles that would affect the team. Often they're walking the product owner through stories or requirements that might be a little bit more technical, and ultimately they're the facilitator of the meeting. So they're encouraging the collaboration between the team and the product owner and the negotiation, and you know, not overcommitting to what they can get achieved. So our daily Scrum, this is the meeting where the team comes to communicate with each other. It's normally held daily. I mean, it can be held more frequently, but I think most people do it daily. And it's to inform everyone else in the team what's going on across the team. It allows the team to synchronise their work for the next 24 hours. And the same 3 questions are asked at every meeting. What have you done since the last Scrum? What will you do between now and the next Scrum? What is getting in the way of meeting that Scrum, meeting the sprint goal? It is implied that each team member has accountability in reporting what work was completed yesterday in front of their peers. And so it's really important all team members need to participate, and they should stand during the meeting. That's why you might have heard this referred to sometimes as the daily stand-up. Making everyone stand up, of course, helps with the time boxing, because this meeting is should not last longer than 15 minutes. And no issues or concerns raised during the meeting are allowed to be ignored. You know, these are all recorded by the Scrum Master. These are impediments that they would then have to go away. But I think I want to point out that this is all that is talked about at this meeting. Other things, clarification around stories or conversations to clarify work, is not something that should be done in this meeting. So it's mandatory for the team to be there and for everyone to report, but others are allowed to come along. So people might have heard of chickens and pigs in Agile. So Guy, have you ever heard of chicken and pigs in Agile?
No, it
and
is
you're
fair to say I have not.
fascinated now, aren't you?
Oh, I am titillated.
So, basically the pigs are the team, because they're accountable for the project deliverables. So the analogy is that they've given their life to provide the bacon for the bacon and eggs. Now chickens obviously have only provided an egg and still have life. So people in the Scrum world or in the Agile world are chickens are not committed or accountable. So these are the stakeholders and people outside of the team. So the chickens are allowed to come to this meeting, but they're just not allowed to talk. So they can come along and listen to what the team is communicating between themselves, but only the pigs are allowed to talk.
Good pigs.
So we then got the sprint review. This is where it's all about showcasing the work that the team has done. So the sprint review meeting is typically a short meeting, and during the meeting it's where the team presents to management, to customers, to users, to the product owner, whoever is relevant, users, the product increment that has been built. And the review can be casual, or some of them could be a bit more formal meeting structure. And it's the time for the team to demonstrate the working software that they have completed in the sprint, and it's about them getting immediate feedback from the project stakeholders. Now remember, the work should meet the team's quality standards, the definition of done, to be considered complete and ready to showcase. And last, we've got our sprint retrospective, and this is part of the inspect and adapt process in Agile. So retrospectives help the team understand what worked well, what didn't, and where they can improve. So it's the team assessing the way they work together in the sprint and identifying maybe positive ways of working that they should continue to do in the future. So obviously there are going to be potentially complaints or things that didn't go well, but we don't do that without action. Retrospectives are used to find out what they are, what is working well for them, so that they can continue on those successful areas. But it's also to find out what was not working so great and use the time to find solutions and develop an action plan of how we can do this better. So one of the things that we have said before is that continuous improvement is a big thing. It's what sustains and drives development within Agile teams. And the team collectively needs to own these improvements. They develop an action plan, they need to address what is not working, and they all have to work to do the improvements next time. So once again, Guy, I'm going to pause for some questions here if you've got any. We got some?
Tons, of course.
Tons again. Tons, of course.
I'll scroll back up. I'll start with a comment because I found that one first. This is from Gillian, and thank you, Gillian, for always sending in pithy comments. Chickens can't talk, but they sure can squawk. So I'll take that as a comment.
I like that one.
Yeah,
I might have to. Can I have a copy of that so I don't forget it? I'm going to use that in my courses.
Yeah, well, it'll be in the log. A question from Darren. A common problem is that the themes voted on and discussed at the retro often don't get discussed again over the following sprints. At what meeting or opportunity do you recommend that the outcomes and recommendations of the retro be discussed again and to see if they are being implemented?
Okay, so it's not something that needs to be discussed again. This is what the Scrum Master is responsible for, making sure they follow the rules. We talked about this last week. So the team, the retro gets done. They decide what they're going to work on. I mean, let's say, for argument's sake, you had 10 things that didn't go very well, right? You're not going to try and change all 10 for the next sprint, but you are expected to do something. So the team might decide that out of the 10, as a team, we vote, these are the top 3 we want to work on. So they should do things differently for the next sprint. And if they're not, then that, to me, is back on the Scrum Master, who is responsible for making sure they do actually follow through. I think that's what he was asking, wasn't it? If I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, so
because they're doing this at the end of every sprint, Guy. So, if you're doing 2-week sprints, this is a meeting that's held, and then we try and do something. Now, one of the other things I think I should mention is that it's a no-blame concept as well. So if we try something different to improve and it doesn't work, then it'll come up in a retro again, and we'll try something different.
Right.
So it's sort of we're allowed to fail. We tried it a different way and that still didn't work. So what else can we do? I mean, that's an expectation, but it's a huge part. They have to, as it says, continuous improvement.
Yes, because we've had questions along the lines of, how do we look out for when a team is not performing, and when is it time to make changes? And I suppose it's a constant evolving process.
Well, I mean, if they're not performing, again, it's down to the Scrum Master, which is why we're talking about this course, while we're doing this short course, you know. The Scrum Master really, if they're not performing, that's their job. You are the servant leader. You need to, you know, if you see someone not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then that's where the Scrum Master is the coach and like, hey, you know, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working on this. What's going on, you know? And we talked about that last week, but you know, if there's people, I don't know, I think if a team's not working, then yeah, maybe you need to change. But that's just, you know, you have a team of people that have to work together. And if it's not working, then maybe we look at changing resources or what's the reason it's not working. That's what we need to get to the bottom of, and that's what a retro is all about.
Okay, just a couple more questions. One from Raghu. We mentioned quality as the focus in Agile last week. Does it also mean fast? A lot of people associate Agile with fast. But do you have any thoughts around this?
So we talked about this last week with the manifesto. In addition to the manifesto, there are actually 12 guiding principles, which we didn't have in this short course, but one of those is refers to constant pace. So fast is actually the word I would never use. It's not about the team getting faster and faster and faster at all. It's about them as a team finding their rhythm, which ironically is going to come up pretty much on the next slide when we've done this question and answer, and constantly keeping up the pace. So, you know, one team might get to third gear and that's their rhythm and that's their speed, and another team might get into fifth gear.
Yeah, okay. What does it do? Sorry, no, not that one. Som has asked, in larger and older organizations with distinct functional areas such as development, tests, BAs, project managers, etc., do you have any ideas of how Scrum can be implemented without creating sort of an alienation within that larger and older organization?
Education. So that's the other role of the Scrum Master to, they're a servant leader to the organisation as well, to educate and help organisations move. I mean, it can be a very different, I mean, I can understand what she's asking, what's being asked, that some people might see this as a threat or, you know, this is how it's always been. But if an organisation is keen to go down this, then this is where we need Scrum Masters to come in and help coach everyone on how we're doing it. And, you know, all it means is that that developer is going to be in a new team, which is a Scrum team, and it's not just other developers. And, you know, the tester is not just going to be in a test team. They're in a Scrum team.
All right, maybe just one last one. It's actually come from a few people. Will Scrum work with virtual teams where members are not from where members are from different geographic locations?
Ideally, we want them to be co-located because of the Agile Manifesto of individuals and interactions and face-to-face conversation. But you can have, they're known as distributed teams. But normally you just need to ensure that you've got communication channels. So maybe we're using chat or Skyping or whatever. My husband actually worked on a distributed Scrum team, and it worked really, really well. He and a fellow tester were based in Melbourne. The Scrum Master was in Sydney. The developers were in Melbourne, but like in the city somewhere together, the three of them. And the product owners were in Adelaide and Alice, if I remember correctly. So they only had like a half an hour time difference, so that's not too bad. And they used to do their daily stand-up, their daily Scrum over the phone. every day, and then once a week my husband and the fellow tester would go to the development site. So they'd be in the room with the guys, and then they'd Skype in the product owner and the Scrum Master.
Okay.
So look, ideally you want to be co-located. It can be done, but the minute you're on time zones where there's a bit of a time difference, it starts to get maybe not as easy to manage because of the lack of communication verbally.
Sure. Okay. Beauty. Thanks. There's still, of course, more questions, but we'll keep cracking, folks, and get into the last little chunk of the webinar.
So one of the things we were just talking about there was this constant pace. So all different agile methods have a common underlying foundation, which is the delivery of small increments of working code that is of value to the customer. And this core underlying foundation is often referred to as the heartbeat of Agile. So time boxing is all about establishing this rhythm that I was mentioning. It synchronizes all the activities of all the participants, and the time frame is repetitive and predictable and reliable. So one of the most important benefits about time boxing is that it introduces what's known as a near-term milestone that actually delivers working software at regular intervals. So the diagram that's on the slide now actually shows how this process works within any Agile framework, including Scrum, and you really can't do it without any part of it without the other. At a fundamental level, we talk about define, build, test, define, build, test. So what you actually do is you pull the story or the piece of work from the backlog, you elaborate and design the solution, which is the define. We then code the story, which is the build, and we then test it, which is where we evaluate whether or not what's been built meets its acceptance tests. So AKA we're testing it. Now, if it doesn't pass, then it's reworked and fixed as part of this iterative loop. And so basically we're doing define, build, test until it passes its acceptance test. Now, all requirement approaches in Agile projects are focused on defining just enough detail for the next sprint, specifically providing only enough information to enable the team to understand what the actual requirement is. And so one of the most significant challenges the Scrum Master and the team can face is to determine what kind of documentation is necessary and how much detail it should contain for them to get the job done. And that's the concept of just enough. There's a number of factors that the team will typically consider when they're deciding on what is just enough for them. So some examples of factors would be they need to make a conscious decision on the level of detail they want to start with, and then you would expect that they might tune or tweak the level of detail as the project progresses. The other thing is you should ask yourself, who is this for and how does it help them? Because if you don't know the answer, then you shouldn't write it down. And lastly, there's a difference between the information that's required during the development, the sprint, that define, build, test concept I was just talking about, to information that needs to be documented after. So during the development, during the sprint, any document created is normally done because it's about helping understand the problem so that the team can define what they need to build and how the solutions work together. And of course there's information that you need after, post-development, how to operate and understand what was built. And so, you don't have to do it in the sprint, you can do it after. And of course, it's not just about documentation. As we've discussed tonight, all these elements of Scrum are approached in a just enough. The meetings, you know, are just long enough, and, you know, we go through just enough to everything is, I talk just enough. So as a Scrum Master, it's really important that you understand this concept, because your role is to help the team ensure they have the correct amount of documentation, the correct amount of ceremony and compliance in place for them and what they need. So that's it for week 2. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hearing more next week. We have some homework for you again, which is to answer some or all of the questions presented, and again, posting your answers on the forum or constructively responding to another student's post or discussion. So just a quick run through of the homework questions. We've got give an example of how a Scrum team works to explain one of the Scrum core values. How do the values, practices, artifacts and ceremonies of Scrum differ to traditional project methodologies, and why is it important for the Scrum Master to understand this? We've given you a bit of a scenario that as a Scrum Master, how would you encourage just enough for a small co-located team designing mobile phone applications? And lastly, why do you think the sprint retrospective is such an important ceremony? And in closing, I'm looking forward to speaking to you again next week, where we are going to be going into more details about the Scrum Master's role during the product backlog and maintenance and creation, release planning and adaptive planning. So that's it for me tonight, Guy. Any more questions before we finish up?
Of course. We've got a couple of people asking us to repeat the quote about the chickens and the squawking, and Gillian has asserted her copyright. So that's all good fun.
Or if I've got her name, I'll give her copyright whenever I use it.
Very good. We've got the log. We'll keep it for you. First up, we'll just have a quick query from Dilip, who's asked whether he can share some of the slides that we provide on the course page with his friends. He's a senior project manager and mobile development team. First of all, I'll say you of course can invite him to join the course at any point, because you can join the course right up until the exam period. But
and
if
it's
not,
free to join.
And it's free, but if not, would you mind sharing your slides?
Well, I think that's a question for offline. I don't know what they're not my slides, they're your slides, aren't they?
Yep.
IT Masters, so we're happy to share, or I don't know what the...
Sure. We might get me to make a note of that.
Yeah, I think that's an admin type question.
Beauty. All right, we've got one from Jonathan. In companies with multiple scrums, would you recommend sharing the sprint retrospective and the lessons learnt from those across the scrums, or would you have each team have autonomy?
What do you think I'm going to say, Guy? It depends.
Maybe.
No. So when what he's referring to is what's commonly called as a scrum of scrums, and so where you've got multiple teams, often each team will have their own daily scrum, and then often they would then have what's known as a scrum of scrums, which is where one representative from each of those teams goes to another daily scrum, and it's slightly different because they're bringing the information from their team to the meeting and taking back the information from the other teams back to their team. Now you can do something similar with the retrospective, but it depends. It is one of the issues when you do have larger projects and scrums of scrums. One of the issues is that you know, they need to decide, and one of the issues is it's individual to a team. So in a retro, what wasn't working for us might not be a problem for someone else. So I'm not saying we couldn't listen to what came up for other teams and maybe learn from it, or how they've changed and what's worked for them might work for us. But if we're going to try and make everyone do the same changes, then I think that's where we might get in a bit of trouble. But again, it depends.
Sure.
Can I just interject? So just if it wasn't clear, there's a big yes to share in the slides, so not a problem.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Had a few questions while we're talking about sprint retros about release retrospectives, whether there's a distinction, whether there should also be one. Have you got any comments about release retrospectives?
Actually, you know what? I might pass that one over to Leanne, if she's happy to answer that one.
Sure. While she's jumping on board, folks, Leanne is an Agile practices consultant at Planet. She's somewhat of a celebrity in Agile practices, apparently. One of the reasons for that, or a couple of the reasons, is her years of practice. She was into it before it was cool, and was also voted by her peers as an ICT Woman of the Year in New South Wales in 2014. So welcome, Leanne.
Thank you, Guy. More than happy to answer that question. So as Sarah said, the retrospectives happen at the end of each sprint. So we would be talking about things that we can make improvements in, or good practices that we're doing that we want to continue in the sprint. But yes, of course, there may be items that relate to the release as a whole. So it's good practice to have a final retrospective at the end of a release, which you would then carry forward to the next release.
Cool. Would you be interested in sticking around for another couple, or the two of you can answer together?
Well, you ask and I'll either handle or answer, or I'll answer a bit and then handle over and see what else she comes up with. That might work.
Beauty. There's a couple of questions about just enough. Questions around who agrees, who sets it if there's a disagreement amongst the team, and how important is it to have correct architecture around it, or framework surrounding just enough.
Well, the team decides. The team needs to decide, and again, there's a reason that we limit the size of people in a team. It's not really anything specific to do with Agile or Scrum, so to speak. It's the number of people. They need to be able to get consensus. So if you get too many people, you won't get agreement. You'll get too many people standing their ground and being stubborn and won't go along. So as much as there would be disagreements, ultimately it's about the team needing to decide. And if they decide something, as I said, and it's not enough, then we'll write a bit more. And that's where the Scrum Master comes in. They're responsible for making sure the guys come up with a decision, and that's what we're going with, and it might change. So I think it's very important. I don't know if Leanne would like to add anything. If she does, feel free.
I think that's one of the things as your Agile teams mature, that you get better at defining what just enough is for your team. And it's important to understand that just enough is different for differing teams. So when a team is just newly formed, they may find that just enough is really quite a lot of documentation, whereas teams that have worked together for a long period of time, that just enough will be maybe even a diagram with some annotated notes on it rather than lots and lots of documentation. So there's reasons that impact the decision that the team makes for just enough. So another example is if you have a highly complex system, for example, that you're designing and building, then you may need more documentation than if it's just simply a maintenance build, for example.
Right.
Thank you, Leanne. Guy, anything else?
Yeah, we'll just go for a couple more. Ibrahim is wondering about whether there's a relationship between just enough and just in time. Is just in time a concept, particularly relevant to Scrum?
I would say so. it is, to me, it's related to that. Again, I don't need to write stuff until I need it. So I write it in time for when I need it, and it's just enough. And again, Leanne, feel free to jump in with anything else.
Yeah, so just in time for me really means at the beginning of the project, you're going to have some high-level concepts about what it is that you want to deliver and some general ideas, which is commonly known as epics, which is large user stories, if you like. And then as you get closer to delivering on each of those items, you will then make sure that you put the level of detail needed in order to be able to design, code and test those items. So just in time really means just before you're about to use those stories or those activities or features that you're going to build.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. I've got a couple of questions from Carl and Adel. I reckon that perhaps it might be an idea to talk about what's covered in the Scrum courses first and go into James's to chat about Planet and what your services are, because there are questions about whether elements of the Scrum and Agile are how they are realistic, how to expect a Scrum team to go back and write documentation that might be, you know, something that they've worked on a while before, and how to manage the risk when a team decides on their own priorities within a Scrum team. So I might just leave those guys for after James' presentation and Leanne's. But just one last question from Doug before we do get into that. Is it better for team morale to limit work in progress to build momentum for your team as a Scrum Master if a team's members' estimates seem too ambitious, or if the agreements seem really ambitious? Leanne, you were saying, you know, that a team might evolve over time, might improve over time. Would it be something that you might sort of say, well, maybe we should sort of start slow with these?
My recommendation would be definitely, if you're a newly formed team, then err on the side of caution, yes, because whatever you commit to, you're setting an expectation with your stakeholders. So it is a good idea for newly formed teams to maybe go to a slightly lower level and then overcommit on the first few sprints. But obviously you don't want that to happen continuously, because saying that you can do additional work in each sprint is also going to lose confidence with the stakeholders, because they're expecting you to come up with an accurate estimation of what you can achieve and what your capability is within the team. So you need to get the happy balance, but certainly for new teams, then I would say when you're doing your estimation, possibly knock off 1 or 2 stories from your estimation, because I've found working with hundreds of different teams that they tend to overcommit, certainly in the beginning. So do your estimate and then maybe knock off 1 story when you're a new team.
Because that basically, that's what I was saying about the sprint planning early here is, you know, that's the thing. You want to make sure as a Scrum Master that they're not overcommitting. You know, Leanne's right, where especially you see people, they just believe they can do, you know, 50 things, and the reality is when they're new, it might be 5.
Overconfidence is my greatest strength and biggest weakness. So, yeah, I'll definitely get that done in that time. No,
yeah,
no, I won't.
yeah.
All right. Well, we might call the questions off there. We're getting to the hour point. I might just introduce James now and make your presenter, Jess, so you can show the accompanying presentation. Keep your questions coming in, folks. I'll put as many to James as I can, and there will be a bit of a focus on what he's presenting and what the Planet courses are all about. and the Scrum courses are all about. So if your questions haven't been answered again this week, because again there've been a fair few, feel free to post them in the forum, and we'll just get a discussion going there. But thanks, Sarah, for the presentation. If we don't hear from you, thanks very much again for this week, and we'll speak to you next week. Okay, Jessica, you have the floor, and James, you have the mic.
All right, thank you very much, guys. It's been great listening to Sarah again this week, and nice to have Leanne along, because she's my phoner friend. My name's, for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm James Pennyfather. I'm the Director of Training at Planet, and I run a great team of people who have basically certified more people in software testing than everyone else in the whole sort of Asia Pacific region over the last 17 years that Planet's been into testing training. But we do an awful lot of BA training, and the big topic at the moment, because it is the fastest growing framework and methodology in the world, is our agile training. So we have a full suite, but the big thing we're talking about tonight, and have been for a long time, sort of taking over now, is the Scrum Master training. So that's why we're very lucky to be on board with the guys from IT Masters to be able to bring this to you. But basically the training that we have for Scrum Masters training certification, it's a 2-day course. You can take it online or in a classroom. Both have great merits in either delivery form. Some people are contractors and don't have time to take a couple of days off for training, and they need to do their work on the bus and on their mobile devices, etc. That's where the online delivery is fantastic. Other people work really well in a classroom environment where they can really interact with a lot of their friends, colleagues, teammates, and like that one-to-one interaction. So that's where the classroom courses go tremendously well. The nice thing, what we've got for everyone who's enrolled in the course today, is we've obviously got a discount of 15%, and I've got a discount code that I'm putting up in the forums. And I've just spent the last hour or so, apart from listening to all the conversation, going through the forums, and there's some great questions in there. So we'll put that code in, but if you do miss it, it's in just capital letters, CSU SCRUM 17. If you go to the Planet website and you put that into the shopping cart, you'll get your discount. Also, you can just contact us at info@planettesting.com, and we'll certainly help you with that. We'll tell you all the times and dates that's coming up in the next few months, both in classroom and how you can get on board with online. So I think that's enough of a bit of a sales pitch. What I'd really like to hear some more questions, Guy, that you've got, and listen to some of Leanne's words of wisdom. So if you've got any more questions, or if anyone would like to ask questions about the courses, please fire them off.
Absolutely, there are questions. There's hundreds of them. I'll just answer one for Fred, who actually unfortunately has just left. His question was perhaps a bit of a pithy. So this is a lead generation for Planet, and that's certainly one part of why we're doing it. But as I sort of mentioned at the start of the first week's lecture, it does stand alone in its own right. We are trying to make this a standalone course where hopefully you just get an overview of what it is that is available out there, get an idea of what Planet is doing, and if you enjoy the course, well, then it's just a win-win for everyone, we think. But yeah, there is certainly an element of, we feel at IT Masters that it's a great system, so go for it. Some of the questions that we've got, though, James, filtering through that I thought might be interesting if you answered them, is something that, well, they're not so much questions, but they're requests of this course that it really isn't part of the scope of this course to discuss, and they're wondering whether there are specifics within your courses. Sarah's favourite phrase, and probably mine too, is it depends, and with a lot of the questions that we have been asked, is it more sort of specific? Are there examples given within those courses?
Oh, absolutely. Basically, we've got 3 one-hour sessions here, which has got questions and answers included. The course tape goes over 2 days, and so you get a much deeper in-depth view of Scrum, a bit of history around Agile, comparing it, Agile versus traditional methodologies, and why Agile and Scrum has become such a dominant framework in delivery around the world. And it's all about, and it also occasionally mentions how they all react to with each other, because there's been a few questions like, how does Kanban and Lean relate to Scrum? Well, they're all coming up with the same values of trying to actually give more delivery for less effort, with less rigor and more teamwork. So they all sort of work together. But the nice thing is that you learn about the Scrum framework, you get all the the in-depth learnings. The role of a Scrum Master is really vital, and something that Leanne and I talk about all the time, that in this instance, how would the Scrum Master react to actually be able to work better with the team or get better results from the team? And that just came up over and over and over again every time we were trying to create an activity. Leanne actually pulled out the stick and said, now, how does a Scrum Master act in this situation in a retrospective or a daily stand-up, And then, we really talk about Scrum planning, estimation, what can go right and wrong in sprints, reviews, retros, all those things. But we have actually 2 days to go through it. So you really will get a much more in-depth view, because it's very hard to push that much information into basically a 45-minute chat. Yeah. Leanne, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the important thing to emphasize is that there's plenty of practical exercises within the course, and we allow plenty of time for discussion. And in fact, we encourage people to bring their ideas, their problems, the things that they're experimenting with their teams actually to the course, so that we can combine those experiences, not only of the trainer and how they've worked with lots of different and varying teams, but also other people on the course can share their experiences, and you can learn from those experiences as well.
Absolutely. One thing I really like about it that we always do on the courses is we break the rooms up into teams. So we actually have little sprints and little teams and exercises and practical exercises and learning exercises based on those teams. So that's really great. Thanks for reminding me, Leanne. What's the next one, guys?
We've got a few about differences in different Scrum courses, but I thought maybe given we're trying to make this course stand on its own 2 feet, can we have a couple of those little activities now? Not so much activities, but sort of questions about specifics. How, for example, the ones that I left for now, Carl and Edel's questions. How do we manage risk if the team decides on their own priorities of the Scrum team? How is it realistic to ask a team to go back and write new documentation on something that they may have written, up to months before? How does it work in practice?
Okay, I can take those. So the risk factor, that's actually one of the key benefits, again, of using an Agile methodology. So the risks are highlighted much earlier in the project through risk workshops, through the continual discussion of how we're designing our stories, how we're building them, how we're testing them. So risk is assessed on an ongoing basis in an Agile project, rather than risk being talked about maybe right up front in a traditional waterfall methodology, for example, and then those items put in a risk register and people not really looking at them again until the risk actually turns into an issue. So even at the ceremonies that Sarah talked about, such as the daily stand-up, you can have a conversation about risk on a daily basis. So the risks are highlighted, made visible, discussed much more frequently, and therefore it's likely that they have less impact because they're dealt with straight away. So that's from a risk perspective. The second part of your question around documentation, Sarah mentioned the definition of done. So that's at a higher level than the user story, where the team identifies items that they need to complete in order to demo the user story at the sprint demo or sprint showcase. And one of the things, if documentation is important to your team, is that you could have that as an item on your definition of done. So you actually build up the documentation as you go, and a story's not complete unless the right level of documentation is produced. And that documentation could be in the form of help files, for example, user manuals if you're doing training, or documentation that is handed to your production team or your go live team or your maintenance team if they are all different teams. Although the concept of DevOps, which we're not talking about on this course, but that certainly brings those team or members of those teams into your actual Scrum team so that it's been looked at on a continuous basis.
Okay, thank you. Just scrolling through the questions now again. Just a quick one from Doug as I get myself sorted. Scrum Master of each team is ambassador for their team at Scrum of Scrum meetings, is that correct?
Not necessarily. So I'm trying to avoid the depends answer.
You can just use maybe, that's fine.
So the Scrum of Scrums, you definitely have to have an ambassador from your team at that Scrum of Scrum meetings. Often I have seen it where teams use the Scrum Master to be that ambassador, but my recommendation when I'm working with teams is that it's the person that is most appropriate within your team that is going to be able to answer questions, because the Scrum of Scrums is effectively, again, another communication opportunity. So if you're at the point where there's a lot of development happening, then I would recommend that a developer goes to that Scrum of Scrum meetings. If you're at the point where there's a lot of testing or there's a lot of complexity in the testing, then I would recommend one of the testers goes to that meeting. So the idea of having a Scrum of Scrums is for communication within the teams. So whatever level of communication needs to happen and whatever they are communicating, the subject of their communication, really it should be the person with the most knowledge in that area that is the one that goes to the Scrum of Scrum meetings.
Okay, I'm wondering whether that might help answer my next question from Ray, who was asked about projects involving several different elements. Leanne and James, you may have noticed that I'm not particularly strong on the technical front, and I'm sorry for that. So perhaps my questions might be put to you a bit poorly. But for a project that involves hardware purchase and installation, as well as the software, how do you incorporate those different elements into a Scrum team? How do you, for example, as Ray puts it, incorporate procurement and installation experts with software developers? Would they be separate teams, or would it be just you make up the team according to the requirements?
Yeah, spot on. So I think Sarah did cover this, although not specifically in hardware. So whoever are the people with the knowledge, the skills, the expertise, in order to be able to deliver whatever your end product is, and if that end product is a combination of hardware and software, then someone with those skill sets or capability needs to be in your team. Now, it may be that it's a hardware deliverable up front. And in that instance, Sarah hasn't covered it during this course, but often teams or agile teams use something called iteration 0, where if there's a lot of hardware procurement happening and that needs to be available up front for the teams to then do their delivery onto, that happens as an upfront activity.
Beauty. Okay, thank you. Now we've got most of the people who attended have stayed on, so thank you very much for that. I suppose a lot of you are staying for information about the Scrum Master courses themselves, so I've got some questions about that. Siddharth has asked, can you, if we can advise if the Scrum Master accredited certification course is the same as the Certified Scrum Master certification course, or the Professional Scrum Master course, and he's also wondering whether the Scrum Master accredited course is accredited by a particular Scrum body.
Okay, I can answer that. Look, there is a number of Scrum certifications out there in the world, as the person asking the question has asked. Is it first the Certified Scrum Master, the Professional Scrum Master, the CSM, PSM? There's the SMC, which is Scrum Master Certified, which is one product that we actually help with, and the Scrum Master Accredited certification comes from the Scrum Institute. They're all really good courses. It all just depends on your delivery, your ability in your local area to find a great trainer for it. I'm not going to say anything bad about any of them because they all basically teach a variety of great tools when you're part of a Scrum team. We obviously think ours is superior because we do really work on the teamwork aspects, the practical aspects, and because we are from a testing background, we really work hard on delivery. And that comes again from Leanne's input into our course because she's been a test manager for over 20 years. By trade, and that's actually really helped us, we think, bring a real practical, real world and delivery point of view to the course. So great question, but it's whichever suits you best. Obviously we're very proud of our course and we work very, very hard on constantly updating it with what we feel to improve it all the time. So yep, but it's the Scrum Institute that we use.
Thank you. Gareth is wondering, do we need certain experience before doing a Scrum Master course?
Generally not, but I could actually lead this one to Leanne to fill in a little bit more. But we teach how Agile works and how to act as a Scrum Master, because it's no use saying we're going to be a Scrum Master if we actually don't understand the core framework of Agile and Scrum itself. But it does lend itself to people who are already in the industry, understand SDLC delivery, and yeah, so it is wise. What do you think, Leanne? You still there?
Yep, I'm still here. I think you don't. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
To come on the Scrum Master course, then you don't need any previous experience. So new people to the industry can come on the course. Equally, I think it's of value to existing Scrum Masters or people that are enacting that role, if they haven't got a certification, to get that recognition of their level of knowledge. And also for people that have been a Scrum Master for a little while, it's always good to get fresh ideas from different people on the courses and a different viewpoint, if you like, of what's happening in Scrum and how you can make improvements. Because as James said, we are continually reviewing this course along with all of our courses to make sure that they're current and that new trends and new ideas are introduced into the courses. So really it's a course that's ideal for brand new people, people that might just want to understand a bit more about what Scrum is all about and how they can implement it within their organisation or their team, up to people that have already been practicing Scrum for a while.
Thank you. One has asked about cost differential between online and classroom courses, and also is wondering how many PDUs one can get from a Scrum Master course from Planet.
Okay, I can answer that one. There is, it's around 40% cheaper to do the online course because pretty simply online provides you a much cheaper delivery platform, or less expensive, not cheaper, but less expensive delivery platform. We don't need to rent out a venue, lunch, put people on planes, trainers on planes and hotels and all that sort of stuff. So it does provide a really cost-effective way of doing it. When it comes to PDUs, they're generally through the IIBA and the Project Management Institute. We no longer subscribe to those for all our courses because it was quite, to be honest, it was quite expensive each year to pay for, and we just weren't finding many people really asking for it. We get occasional questions about it once or twice a year. So recently we didn't renew those subscriptions. But so sorry about that. But that's where it sits.
Okay. Joe has asked, I think for obvious reasons, whether Leanne delivers the courses, or do you have others as well who deliver the training as well?
We have a number of trainers in our organisation. Sarah predominantly does Melbourne. We've got 2 full-time trainers based in Sydney, others in Wellington, Auckland, but we at Planet, we have a lot of delivery guys and practitioners who Leanne has actually been responsible for training throughout the organisation to make sure that people don't just get, they get real world war stories and topics talked about, etc. So Leanne's put in a lot of work to bring a lot of people in the organisation up to the ability of on her train the trainer courses. But it's generally, Leanne doesn't teach Scrum Masters. She usually teaches trains the trainers for a lot of these things.
Out of luck, sorry Joe. Maybe perhaps just a couple last questions. One from Mark, can I do the 3-day Scrum course that includes the product owner and Scrum Master content and certifications exams?
We haven't got to the product owner course yet as part of our delivery. That's actually, again, different company. We will be introducing that probably in the next 12 to 18 months. But right now, this is where we're getting asked a tremendous number of questions around. And then a lot of there are some other really quite in-depth certified agile tester courses, which are real practitioner levels that we sort of focus on. So product owner, yes, watch this space. Okay.
And
I think, can I just interject there?
Of course.
So we do have a certified agile business analyst course that is suitable for product owners to go on. So we can maybe post some details of that course as well for product owners if they're interested in learning about that part of the team.
And the Certified Agile Essentials really is a great one for that also. Yep.
Okay, which I think answers last question for tonight, and thank you everyone for sending so many in. We can't get to all of them, I'm sorry, but just one last one from Ray. Are Planet courses limited to software development project training, or do you cover other applications of Scrum?
No, I'll leave that one to Leanne.
So as James said, we do have Agile Essentials, which is been built for the whole team. So that covers everyone. We do have the Certified Agile Tester, which is the next level up in training, if you like. So it really is for practitioners. So that's available, the Certified Agile BA that I mentioned, and we also have Agile Project Management courses.
Yeah, so we try to cover a lot, but we are in the IT world, so that's where they focus.
Beauty. All right, well, thank you both for hanging around. It's now approaching 25 minutes after the hour, so we should probably cut it off now. I want to thank everyone still around. There's still over 200 of you, so thank you for sticking around, and thank you everyone who's listening at home throughout the week. I want to thank James, Leanne and Sarah from Planet, Mia and Jessica from IT Masters. We'll see you all next week. If anyone wants to say a ta-ra for now, that would be fine, but I'll sign off and say thank you everyone for another great webinar.
All right, thank you so much everyone, and I'll definitely get into the forums this week and try and answer a whole lot of the questions as well with my team. All right, but thank you very much for having us to IT Masters. It's really been a pleasure. Thanks, Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. And there's some really interesting questions that we just didn't get time to answer. So we'll post some answers to those questions up in the forum.
All right, thanks very much.
Thanks everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.